Let's get a Democratic response now from Stacey Abrams, former leader of the Georgia House of Representatives, author of the new book, Our Time Is Now. Ms. Abrams, thank you for joining us this morning. Let's pick up right where I left off with Dr. Carson right there. He says we have to grow up.
I think that is a fairly infantile response, actually, to say that words don't have meanings, that dates don't have meanings, that dates don't have power. But this is from the administration that on the 4th anniversary of the Pulse murders of the LGBTQ community stripped away health protections for that community. This is the same person who had to be convinced that having a rally that would necessarily and has traditionally attracted people who do not care about Black lives, that they were going to have this rally in Tulsa at the site of a Black massacre, and it took a week of cajoling to make him move. And so let's be very clear. This isn't about growing up. It's about taking responsibility and having accountability for the actions that have been taken by this country and by people acting on behalf of this country. And we do have a day of reckoning, and that day of reckoning is going to continue until we actually make change.
We saw media taking responsibility last night in Atlanta. I want to ask you about that incident over the weekend in Atlanta, the killing of 27-year-old Rayshard Brooks. Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms did speak out on this yesterday. Let's listen.
While we have a police force full of men and women who work alongside our communities with honor, respect, and dignity, there has been a disconnect with what our expectations are and should be as it relates to interactions with our officers and the communities in which they are entrusted to protect.
What a disconnect that is. She mentioned this the third time in the last 2 weeks she's had to review police video.
And that is why you saw the reaction from protesters. That is why the virulence of anger remains. Activists are necessarily calling into question what's actually being done. And what I would say is that there's a legitimacy to this anger. There's a legitimacy to this outrage. A man was murdered because he was asleep in a drive-thru. And we know that this is not an isolated occurrence. We also know that a man taking a taser from a police officer in Pennsylvania resulted in his arrest. But because this person was Black, it resulted in his death. Those are conversations that have to be had not only through speeches, but through the decisions made by budget allocations. And I think that's the next conversation we have to have in Atlanta.
Well, and that is the conversation happening right now, this whole debate over defunding the police. The Democrats' nominee, Joe Biden, has said he's against defunding the police, but of course is for investing more in social services and other programs. What does defunding the police mean to you, and is it necessary?
I think we're being drawn into this false choice idea. The reality is we need two things. We need reformation of how police officers do their jobs, how law enforcement does its job. Because what happened yesterday to Rayshard Brooks was a function of excessive force, and the decision that the fact that they were either embarrassed or panicked led them to murder a man who they knew only had a taser in his hand. We know that the murder of Breonna Taylor means that we have to reform no-knock warrants. We know that in the state of Georgia, we also have to look at the larger judicial issue of the fact that people can use citizen arrest laws to murder men like Ahmaud Arbery in the streets. So reformation is absolutely important. What we saw happen in New York is a part of this. I served in the state legislature for 11 years, and I served on the committee of purview. I took action to increase police accountability. I took action to address the issues of criminal justice reform. But I also know that we have to have a transformation of how we view the role of law enforcement, how we view the construct of public safety, and how we invest not only in the work that we need them to do to protect us, but the work we need to protect and build our communities. And that's the conversation we're having. We'll use different language to describe it, but fundamentally we must have reformation and transformation.
Georgia had a primary election this week. We saw some chaotic sites across the state, but including in the Atlanta area, in Fulton County, long lines, voting machines which weren't working properly. I know you've talked about the responsibility of the Secretary of State for this, but there are also problems in the county itself, Fulton County, controlled by Democrats. What must be done to fix it? Will Georgia be ready by November?
Again, this is an attempt by the Secretary of State to deflect from his responsibility. Fulton County is the largest county in the state, but right next door, the second and third largest counties, one run by Republican and the other run by Democrats, had the same issues. We had 20 counties that had to get judicial orders to extend their elections because of inoperable machines, because of lack of training for their staff, because of the challenges posed by the failure of the Secretary of State. Cobb County, led by Republicans, have called on him to resign because they know that he's refusing to take responsibility. Of course, you're going to have more concentrated problems in the single largest county in the state, but the larger responsibility is that with 20 counties, Democrat, Republican, urban and rural, all facing the same challenges, the buck has to stop with the person who's constitutionally obligated to solve this problem. And let's be clear, my organization, Fair Fight, and Freedom Works, a Charles Koch organization, all warned against the approach that the Secretary of State was taking. He did it anyway, and now he has to be accountable for it.
Before you go, I have to ask you about the vice presidential search by Joe Biden. You've made no secret of the fact that you're prepared to serve if asked, but have you been interviewed by his team? Are you being vetted?
I will say that vetting conversations need to be had with the Biden team. I was responding on the Colbert Show to a very specific question that was raised about April Ryan, who is a respected journalist who unfortunately has been pilloried by the Trump administration, by Donald Trump himself. And I wanted to be clear about the fact that I was responding to a very narrow question. But writ large, my focus is on making sure that we have elections that can happen in November. There will be no vice president. There will be no president if our democracy crumbles under the inefficiencies and the inequities that we see happening. And we want to have an administration led by Joe Biden that transforms America and makes us a stronger and safer nation. That's what I write about in Our Time Is Now, and that's what I'm going to be working on from now until November.
Thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you.